Hi, good morning. So the question today comes from Girte Vink. Girte Vink. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. So Girte is writing from Europe, and Girte says, I have read your article in Newsweek with interest. I understand that certain parts of the brain become active as the team gears to defend themselves out of fear. My questions are, what can be done to deflate such a situation as it's forming? What can be done to release the fear of white supremacists and others to prevent incidents from escalation into violence? Okay, so I am not going to read the rest of the question. I'll just answer it to the best I can. When a baby is born, it has actually more neurons than an adult brain, more connections, etc. And gradually there is what you might say a pruning of the brain based on experience. So if you bring up kittens, for example, in an environment where the room has only horizontal stripes, then the kittens will grow up to see only horizontal world. If you put kittens in a room which has vertical stripes, then when they grow up, they'll only see a vertical world. So what happens is, as a result of experiences in early childhood and perceptual experiences and the interpretation of perceptual and cognitive experiences, the brain edits out everything that doesn't reinforce what has now become a belief. So these little kittens seeing a horizontal room with horizontal stripes believe that that's what the world looks like, and then the connections between neurons are so laid out that they only allow them to see a horizontal world, the world that they have now come to believe in. Okay, so for several thousand years, humans have lived as tribes. Tribal leaders were basically hunter-gatherers in the past. And then, as the age of industry came around, and even before that, the leaders became colonialists and conquered the world. You had monarchs, you had kingdoms, and today we have political leaders as well. They're all leaders of the tribe. They're all leaders of the pack. And until recently, the pack has been based on ethnicity. Either you're black, or you're white, or you're yellow, or you're brown. In fact, here is the bracelet I'm wearing, which are all the colors of the human skin. So these are the colors of the human skin, and based on these colors, people have created tribes and then tribal leaders. And when the tribe is threatened, then of course there is fear. Fear generates anger, hostility, grievances, resentments, and ultimately can result in extreme hatred. Hatred is nothing other than fear, just like the opposite of fear is love. So the opposite of fear, not the opposite, the emotion that goes along with fear are all the ones that I mentioned: anger, hostility, guilt, shame, resentment, grievances, and even depression. So today we are learning a lot about what that brain looks like. Also people have found, scientists have found, that depression precedes almost every chronic illness. And as I've mentioned before, a lot of chronic illnesses are a result of inflammation in the body, inflammation in the brain as well, which precedes things like Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease, and many other neurological diseases as well. As I've mentioned before, that there are only 5% of disease-related gene mutations and that are fully penetrant, which means that they guarantee the disease. The other chronic illnesses are related, yes, including cancer, are related to inflammation. Only 5% of disease-related mutations, including those for cancer, are fully penetrant. So how do you get rid of this tribal tendency? I showed you this bracelet. It was given to me by a friend of mine, Jonathan Granoff, who runs a world security organization, and he's an extremely active person in the disarmament arena, helping the United Nations. So this bracelet, all these rings, they cover the entire spectrum of the colors of the human skin. How do we get out of this tribal behavior? And I shall continue with that. How do we cure the hateful brain? I'll continue with that in just 15 seconds. I'm back here, so I'm continuing to answer your questions. Most of them are coming from You Are the Universe, Discovering Your Cosmic Self and Why It Matters. And I thank you very much for the support on this book. So I was talking about the inflamed brain, the brain of people who are hateful is also inflamed. So today, of course, we know that inflammation has become a social illness too. Inflamed bodies, inflamed minds, inflamed brains lead to inflamed societies, and that leads to hate and violence. So how do we cure that? First of all, we have to take care of the inflammation. And so if you look at political leaders right now, and I'm looking at the political leader of the United States, Mr. Trump, it's, to a physician, his behavior does reflect a lot of inflammation in both body, mind, and also probably in the brain. It would be good to do maybe a scan, a nuclear magnetic resonance scan, or some other scanning of the brain to see if it is inflamed. But certainly his mind, body, and actions definitely display inflammation. And so the first thing to do is cure the inflammation, and that starts with simple things like good sleep, like meditation and stress management, like exercise. Other than golf, I don't think our leader is getting much exercise either. Yoga and breathing techniques, I'm sure he's never practiced those. And of course, other things like nutritious food, which is anti-inflammatory. Lois Lynn says turmeric. Yes, turmeric is very good for inflammation, except it doesn't cross the blood-brain barrier. And then, of course, I've mentioned grounding, grounding devices and walking barefoot on the earth or on the beach. All these decrease inflammation. But then after that, one needs to actually learn how to step out of tribal behavior, because right now what we have is modern capacities and Bronze Age mythologies and Bronze Age tendencies for tribal behavior. That needs a different kind of education starting from childhood. Our future as humans is at stake when we have tribal behavior, Bronze Age mythologies that go under the name of religion or religious ideology, and then violence as a result of that. So that needs a new kind of education to understand not only our common humanity, but as we go past all our limited identities. Limited identities means race, religion, nationality, tribe, skin color. We go beyond that, we enter the realm of consciousness, where we realize that even the human identity is a limited identity, because ultimately we are a species of consciousness, and we are branches on a tree from other life forms, starting with plants and microbes. We know so much about the microbiome and all other species, that we are kind of rivulets coming from the ocean of consciousness. And as we go past the dark alleys, the ghost-filled attics of the mind, we go past the self-image called the ego, we enter the realm of the cosmic self, where there is only truth, goodness, beauty, harmony, and evolution, and love, compassion, joy, equanimity as our natural tendencies. So somebody asked, what's your opinion regarding meat eating? Well, meat has a lot of hormones and all kinds of chemicals because it's produced industrially, so a plant-based diet is definitely helpful in decreasing inflammation. So we have a long way to go, my friends, before we tame the hateful brain, but in the meanwhile we can be the change we want to see in the world, and ultimately the leaders of the world, including the presidents of the world and all the past tyrants of the world, from Hitler to Genghis Khan, they were inflamed people, and we need to recognize that. But the leaders of the world are also the focal points of our collective consciousness. And unless collective consciousness changes, the world will remain in flames. So I ask you, my friends, to be peaceful, to be joyful, to transcend, to practice self-reflection, to be mindful, to observe your reactions, to react, and be the change that you want to see in the world. Then when we are less inflamed, the world will be less inflamed, and our leaders will be less inflamed, because our leaders are just the localization and the recycling of the inflammation in our collective consciousness. Take care, and I'll see you tomorrow.